so glad you can join us. Here's what we have for you this Thursday. The major challenges ahead after Ottawa and Alberta sign a deal.
This is Alberta's moment of opportunity.
The pros and cons of a risky political pipeline venture.
We think that when the state is neutral, Quebecers are free.
Quebec clamps down even more on religious expression.
And that the agency is not a real agency. It was an international human trafficking ring.
Plus, the staggering number of Canadians caught up in the web.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
A signing ceremony today in Calgary between Ottawa and Alberta that paves the way for a pipeline to British Columbia. It is a major energy deal that lays out the groundwork, but leaves lots of unanswered questions, and not everyone is on board. CTV senior political correspondent Mike Couture is with us now with the details of the memorandum of understanding and what it means going forward. But first, before we get to that, Mike, some breaking news.
Yeah, that's right, Sandy. One of those people who is not on board, it seems, with today's announcement is Stephen Guilbeault. He's the former Environment Minister, current Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, as well as the Lieutenant of Quebec for Prime Minister Mark Carney's cabinet. He has submitted his letter of resignation, and as I had mentioned, former Minister of the Environment. He was also the person who brought in a number of the climate change laws that are in position right now, including carbon pricing, emissions cap in the oil and gas sector. Here is part of the statement that he released today. He said, despite the difficult economic context, I remain one of those for whom environmental issues must remain front and center. That is why I strongly oppose the memorandum of understanding between the federal government and the government of Alberta. Now, this resignation, Sandy, comes just hours after that deal was signed. Danielle Smith's excitement could not be contained. Alberta isn't getting a bitumen pipeline yet, but it is one step closer.
This agreement includes a clear path to the construction of an over 1 million barrel per day Indigenous co-owned bitumen pipeline to Asian markets.
If everything goes smoothly, senior government officials say construction could start in 2029. But there's one important caveat.
If there's not a private sector component, there won't be a pipeline.
That's just one of the conditions as laid out in the agreement, as is Indigenous co-ownership and collaboration with BC to share the benefits. There has to be a new carbon pricing agreement, and the Pathways Carbon Capture project must move forward for the pipeline to do the same.
I don't know that the Prime Minister would have agreed to a new bitumen pipeline without Pathways, and we wouldn't have agreed to Pathways without a new bitumen pipeline.
The carbon storage program is key to Canada meeting its commitment of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The federal Conservatives are criticizing the process, saying the Prime Minister could push this ahead using existing legislation.
We even supported him, gives him the power to approve it. So we only need him to do one thing for this pipeline to happen. Get out of the way.
A pipeline would go through BC, but that province wasn't part of this deal. And the Bloc Québécois says it's a dangerous precedent.
The federal government making a deal in order to backstab a province and its jurisdiction.
Alberta has until July 1st to submit a pipeline project application to the new Major Projects Office. Now, if all conditions are met, then the federal government will make an exemption to the oil tanker ban on the BC coast. Sandy?
Thanks, Mike. Now, the rivers, the salmon, the environment are important to Northwest British Columbia and important to First Nations, who will have to sign on to this project. Their agreement is needed. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson is here with the ongoing concerns and reaction from the province. Andrew?
Sandy, BC Premier David Eby and Alberta's Danielle Smith have been butting heads over this for months. And today, Eby responded to the deal he was left out of, calling the project fictional and a drain on federal resources.
We need to make sure that this project doesn't become an energy vampire with all of the variables that have yet to be fulfilled. No proponent, no route, no money, no First Nation support. We already have a publicly owned pipeline. It is not at capacity. It is for sale. Nobody wants to buy it.
The reaction from Northwest BC, the region at the center of the pipeline discussion, is mixed, with many questions still to be answered.
People definitely want to see growth. We want to see economic activity. We want to see the communities flourish. The one thing about a pipe is, and this project right now that has me a bit concerned, is I see BC taking all the risk and Alberta getting all the reward. So how do we line those up?
Coastal First Nations are clear in their opposition to a potential pipeline, saying today they have zero interest in co-ownership of a project that has the potential to destroy their way of life.
Coastal First Nations, along with the province of BC, will do everything in our power to protect our coast from a real threat of an oil spill. There is no technology that can clean up an oil spill. We will never consent to allowing oil tankers in our coastal waters.
Public opinion in BC, according to one recent survey, is tilted towards supporting a new pipeline, with 56% in favor. But as you said, Sandy, off the top, BC First Nations may have the final say here, and we've seen it before. If they are unwilling to sign on, a new pipeline could never materialize.
Okay, Andrew, thank you. Let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapelas. Vashi, I want to talk to you about the deal, but also about the news that former Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault is resigning from cabinet. Originally, government sources were saying that he wouldn't do that. So what changed his mind?
Well, I think the details of what is contained in the Memorandum of Understanding, the explicit nature of the support for an additional bitumen pipeline, and really actually even beyond that, if you read the details of the MOU, Sandy, to just a huge increase in export capacity, along with, in conjunction with, the removal of key environmental policies that Stephen Guilbeault, as Environment and Climate Minister, brought in. I mean, this is a massive political story. It will have huge impacts here in Ottawa. If you think back to the Trudeau era, there are few ministers who represent the agenda on climate more than Stephen Guilbeault. I mean, he was a climate change activist brought into cabinet and then made into a minister who oversaw the environment. The Trudeau government brought in a host of policies that were extremely consequential. What the Mark Carney government did today is reverse a number of those. And now you have huge political impact. My eye is certainly on whether or not others will follow. I'm looking, for example, to Housing Minister and Infrastructure Minister Gregor Robertson out in BC, who has not exactly been a proponent of any additional pipeline capacity out west, and some other MPs as well. So we've got our eye on whether this turns from, I should say, one massive political exit into more, Sandy.
Yeah, and bottom line on this pipeline, Vashi, let's bring the conversation back to that. Will it ever happen? It needs a lot of approval, private dollars, right? Will it happen?
Yeah, I mean, the key is to the point that the Prime Minister made in Mike's piece, a private proponent has to come forward. The argument Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, had made was all of these things need to be in place or environmental policies removed in order for that even to be a possibility. This MOU, in my view, stipulates that the Prime Minister agrees with her. And so they're giving it a shot in conjunction. But that doesn't necessarily mean for sure a private proponent will come forward. There's a lot more to the business case really than just the laws and the MOU that are now in place. And so it remains an open question of whether it actually will go ahead. But I think both the Prime Minister and the Premier would argue today's agreement sets a better stage for that possibility.
All right. As always, Vashi, thank you so much. Okay, an additional crackdown in Quebec on religious expression as that province tables another bill that expands on existing secular restrictions. Now, the goal is to take religion out of provincial institutions and public life. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin is on this story. Geneviève, why is Quebec going ahead with a tougher law?
Well, Sandy, the government says that by banning things like religious prayer rooms, it wants to foster religious neutrality. Critics say that's simply not what it does.
Quebec escalated its crackdown on religion in the public sphere with a new bill on secularism. Bill 9 covers bans on public prayers, on face coverings in daycares and in colleges and universities for both students and educators. It also prohibits public institutions like hospitals from only offering halal or kosher foods.
More secularism and more laïcité. Because we think that when the state is neutral, Quebecers are free.
The bill calls for the closing of university prayer rooms, including this one at Concordia University. It first opened in the 1970s, and students say it is a safe space.
It's them trying to figure out to fix a problem of extremism, which is, as Quebecers, we're all against it. There's no question asked about that. But is removing such places that haven't caused any harms fixing any of these problems? I don't think so. Well, it's rather creating more problems for the communities that are using them.
The government says all religious expression will be equal under the law.
We have the same rules applying to everyone, to every school, to every people, to men, to women.
Still, critics say that, in fact, the restrictions unfairly impact minorities, particularly Muslim women. But from a ban on these prayer rooms to a ban on collective prayers on streets and parks without authorization of the municipality, other religious groups, too, have called it a radical infringement on the rights and freedoms of Quebecers.
The bill evokes the notwithstanding clause to shield it from any potential charter challenges. It will be voted on over the next few months. Sandy.
Okay, CTV Genevieve Beauchemin in Montreal. Well, the Trump administration is promising to crack down on Afghan immigrants after authorities identified the suspect in yesterday's mass shooting as an Afghan asylum seeker. 2 National Guards were seriously injured in the attack. CTV's Judy Trin now on the new plan of action and the possible political motivation of the suspect. Judy.
Sandy, as the 2 National Guards remain in critical condition, we're learning that the suspect once worked with the CIA. 2 National Guards are clinging to life in hospital. 20-year-old Sarah Beckstrom and 24-year-old Andrew Wolf, shot just blocks from the White House.
2 families are shattered and destroyed and torn apart as a result of the actions of one man.
The suspect was also shot, taken down by other soldiers. Officials say Ramanallah Lakhanwal, a 29-year-old Afghan national, drove across the country from his home in Washington state, where he lived with his wife and 5 children.
There is confirmation now that the subject had a relationship in Afghanistan with partner forces. We are fully investigating that aspect of his background as well, to include any known associates that are either overseas or here in the United States of America.
Lakhanwal's relationship was with the CIA, trained and equipped by American operatives to fight against the Taliban. He was among the thousands of people American forces evacuated from Afghanistan after the U.S. military hastily withdrew from the war-torn country under former President Joe Biden. Lakhanwal was officially granted asylum earlier this year. Following the shooting, the U.S. announced that immigration requests of Afghan nationals would be stopped indefinitely, pending a review of security vetting.
As President of the United States, I am determined to ensure that the animal who perpetrated this atrocity pays the steepest possible price.
Lakhanwal is currently charged with multiple counts of assault with intent to kill. Donald Trump says he wants to pursue the death penalty if necessary. He calls this an act of terror.
Okay.
Sandy.
Judy, thank you. A growing crime problem in Canada these days, the sex trafficking of women and children. Calls to a hotline last year reached an all-time high, with every expectation it will be the same this year. CTV's Adrian Gabriel has seen the data that speaks to the scale of human trafficking in this country. Adrian.
Sandy, the latest data is alarming. The Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline is experiencing a record number of calls. One survivor tells us the country is experiencing an epidemic.
Forced into sex work, criminals preyed on Tamia Nagy's vulnerability.
You work 20 hours days. You mainly perform sexual services. You could serve up to 10, 15 clients a day. I was lucky enough that I started out in a strip joint.
Living in poverty in 1998 in Budapest, Hungary, as a 21-year-old, she traveled to Toronto after answering a newspaper ad posted for an overseas nanny.
It was very clear in a very short period of time that the agency is not a real agency. It was an international human trafficking ring.
The Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline received just over 5,100 calls in 2024, an all-time high. A similar number is expected by the end of this year as well.
We need every province in Canada to adapt an anti-human trafficking strategy.
Individuals aren't just being forced into the sex trade, The United Nations has called Canada's temporary worker program a breeding ground for contemporary slavery.
They're using tactics like fear, intimidation, threats, sometimes physical violence and abuse.
Families are also being warned of children being lured through direct messages while playing games on electronic devices.
Young boys, they can also actually be trafficked. Just educate yourself. You don't think it makes a huge difference, but I'm telling you, knowledge is the key.
Nagy was able to escape and has dedicated her life to save someone else from having to walk in her shoes. If you're watching this and believe that you may be a victim or you're concerned about the well-being of someone you know, please call the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline or your local Victim Services Centre. Sandy.
CTV's Adrian Gobriel. A new World Cup specific bylaw was given the green light in Vancouver after City Council approved hefty fines for a range of infractions during next year's FIFA event. The temporary rules, which kick in a few weeks before the tournament, will target disturbing advertising on streets and defacing or postering on light standards and poles. Businesses will have to remove graffiti within 24 hours, and street performing is banned without a permit. Staff say the goal is to protect FIFA's brand. Coming up after the break, Hong Kong's towering inferno. The desperate search for hundreds still missing. The death toll in Hong Kong after a massive apartment fire keeps rising. At least 83 people have died and hundreds are still missing. With the rescue mission still underway, officials say the fire, the worst in Hong Kong in 80 years, is now under control. Investigators have arrested 3 construction company executives on suspicion of manslaughter and negligence for allegedly using unsafe materials that may have fueled the fire. Now, this has been a deadly week of flooding in parts of Asia, with at least 69 people dead and thousands displaced after a tropical cyclone tore through. On the island of Sumatra, powerful floodwaters caused power outages and damaged roads and bridges, hampering rescue efforts. Earlier this week, flooding and heavy rain in Thailand and Malaysia left dozens of people dead. And on a more upbeat note, today is the start of the Thanksgiving holiday in the U.S., which means the annual tradition of the Macy's Parade in the Big Apple. Thousands line the streets of New York City to take in the event, which features supersized creations like a Lego float and massive balloons of iconic characters. Spider-Man, Mickey Mouse, a star-studded lineup of performers included the Radio City Rockettes. But the most important guest, wait for it because we're still looking at the Rockettes, was Santa Claus, the final act ushering in the Christmas season. Financial markets have been hitting record highs in recent months, but beyond fears of a bubble, there is another danger to be aware of, and that is cases of stock market manipulation in Canada are edging up. And regulators across the country are striving to clamp down on evolving tactics. W5's John Woodward has been looking at the numbers and joins us. Okay, John, what did you learn?
Well, Sandy, some of these tactics are very old. People have been trying to trick the stock market for profit for a long time. But what is changing is the sophistication of some of their methods. And some of these are involving sophisticated computer programs that can operate at great scale. They call them algorithms or algos. So we checked with the Canadian Securities Administrators, which represents market watchdogs all across Canada. We found the number of proceedings they've started have climbed from 5 in 2022 to 10 last year. Advocate Terry Lynch of Save Canadian Markets says more needs to be done, calling for more regulation to stop some types of automatic trades that can make a lot of money when stocks go down.
And it's just they just have algos making, you know, $1,000 here and $500 there and $300 there, and you make it on 200 companies. It adds up to real money over time. What we need is the court systems to send some messages out there to say, hey, we need to stop this. You need to be punished, and now you need to get reform.
Okay, so reform, I would imagine, means that regulators are stepping up to the challenge.
Yeah, the numbers show the proceedings are going up, but what isn't going up are the fines. In the years we looked at, the number of fines never crested above $1 million. You compare that to south of the border, some of those punishments are in the range of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Interesting. Okay, interesting series you've given us. Thank you so much, John. CTV's John Woodward. After the break, breathing new life into an historic East Coast basilica. One of St. John's iconic landmarks is getting a new name and a new mission. In addition to worship, part of the Basilica Cathedral of St. John the Baptist will now also be a home for arts and culture. The new vision is being led by a charity that purchased the Basilica complex. CTV's Garrett Berry now on the new lease on life for a centuries-old building. Hey, Garrett.
Sandy, one of the most impressive parts of what this group is now calling the Palace Commons is Bishop Thomas Mullock's library. It's going to be a key part of the revitalization plan inside.
Most people, when they come in here, they are blown away. They don't know it exists.
One of the oldest collections in Newfoundland and Labrador, books in 9 languages, many subjects. Some of these titles date back to the 16th century. The Cathedral Basilica Foundation, the new owners of this property, have taken on the task of bringing it to a new generation.
Our goal is to see this place buzzing, to see people coming and going, to bringing life and creating new stories.
So this space is no longer the Archbishop's Palace. It's now the Palace Commons. This foundation bought the Basilica and these associated properties in 2024. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese was forced to sell this church and all of its other holdings to pay abuse victims, after Newfoundland and Labrador's Court of Appeal found the Archdiocese was liable for abuse by the Christian Brothers at the Mount Cashel Boys Home Orphanage.
In terms of the purchase of the property, I think we got an enormous amount of support from the public.
The history is deep. Church construction was finished in 1855. There were only about 20,000 people in the city. Its new owners are promising to keep the parish alive. It's getting rent from the Catholic Church, but there's plenty of expenses in a building like this.
63 stained glass fixtures in the building, most of which were put there over a 45-year period between the mid-1800s and the early 1900s.
Not everything is being revealed just yet, but part of the plan is to seek long-term tenants, community groups, arts groups, music groups, to bring a new kind of life into this space. Sandy.
All right, Garrett, thank you. And thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandra Ronaldo. Omar is here later, Heather tomorrow. Bye for now. Be well.